Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today focused on fundraising operations and the key elements that need to exist behind the scenes to assure long-term sustainable fundraising. This presentation is designed to fill a gap in training and education around fundraising for all of you that are interested in working in the field, and I hope it's helpful to you. We have a ton of ground to cover in a short amount of time, so why don't we get going? First, let me say how grateful I am to have Melissa and Agnes here on the call with me to guide us through this important discussion, and I'll let them introduce themselves to you in a bit, but first, let me just introduce myself. My name is Chris Looney, the founder and CEO of the Five-Tool Fundraiser, which exists to unite, educate, equip, and inspire fundraising professionals to achieve their fullest potential and maximize their positive impact. I've had the chance to write a few fundraising books, and one is called The Five-Tool Fundraiser. The other is called 365 Fundraising Truisms. Definitely check those out if you can. Interestingly, I come from a family of fundraisers, definitely as Agnes and Melissa know. And over the years, I've probably put in now, I think, 30 years of professional work in the nonprofit sector and fundraising consulting and advising specifically. So if you know me well, you know I'm passionate about helping fundraisers to achieve their full potential, and hoping that this resource that we're providing is helpful to you going forward. So let me now introduce you to our speakers. Agnes, why don't we kick it off with you? Please introduce yourself to our audience. Agnes, I am having a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if the volume's working or not. So why don't,
Oh,
while you're figuring, oh, are you there?
yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, much better.
Yeah.
Sorry about
Okay.
that. Start over. Sorry, thanks.
Okay. No problem. Sorry about that. I'm Agnes, and I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer at the Shea Therapeutic Riding Center in San Juan Capistrano. We're the largest therapeutic riding center in the world. And I started here in 2018. And so it's been about 6.5 years of just a wonderful experience. And prior to that, I was with the American Heart Association in a variety of different fundraising roles. And I too, like Chris, have been in fundraising for over 30 years. And I decided to do it too. I didn't fall into it like a lot of people. So
Good distinction. Great.
yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. Thank you for joining. And Melissa.
Well, I'm Melissa Freilich. I'm the Director of Development at the Pasadena Conservatory of Music. I have been with the conservatory since 2012, so I just completed my 12-year anniversary here, and I actually I met Chris very early on in my tenure here and learned a lot from him early on. I did fall into fundraising. My background is actually in violin performance, so I got my degree in that, and I realized that wasn't my calling, and I went into arts management and found my way to the conservatory after a couple of years. And I really love it here. It's a wonderful school, and our mission is to provide opportunities to learn, perform, and enjoy music, and help our students find joy, excellence, and community. So really glad to be here with you today, and thank you so much for inviting me,
Yeah,
Chris.
of course. Well, thank you. And I do remember vividly those early days
Yeah.
when you had just come on board and
Mhm.
have done such a marvelous job. Both of you have done such a marvelous job at your respective institutions. So know we have the right to people with us to guide us in this conversation about the systems that support great fundraising. And what I want to do is focus on a definition first, which is really about what are fundraising operations. And interestingly, they are systems as well, but systems and operations that are processes, technologies, and systems that support a nonprofit's fundraising efforts. And fundraising systems and operations are essential to the success of a nonprofit's development strategy. They help ensure data integrity, compliance with regulatory requirements, effective prospect engagement, donor stewardship, and so much more. And all of these topics are ones that we're going to really jump into in our conversation today. Really dive into some of the mechanics and some of the requirements and some of the key elements that make fundraising possible, yes, but also make it look easy and in many ways give the false impression that it's not a team sport, which it actually is. It's so easy for all of us to assume that it's capable to hire an individual who is going to be responsible for making it rain, for delivering all of this money that's going to fuel the mission. And that's what a lot of donors, volunteers, board members, the general public kind of assume. Like, oh, you want to raise money, you got to hire a person and they're just going to deliver back up the truck of money to the organization. And we all know that that's not the case at all, that it takes a lot of different elements working harmoniously together to assure consistent fundraising success over time. You know, there's always the case with an outlier gift or an outlier situation, which can prove the opposite point. But consistently over time, growing development, mature departments are those that have these very robust systems that work together, often seamlessly. Now, it's never perfect. There are always things that you wish could work better. We'll talk about those as well. But let's get into that conversation. And what I'd love to do is just sort of kick it off with our facilitators and ask, do you agree with this definition of fundraising operations? And what would you add maybe to make it stronger? So there's no order here. Let's start with Agnes and then we'll go to Melissa. How's the definition hit you, Agnes? We got the volume issue again. I don't know why.
Oh, here, I think I have to face this way. Is that okay? Wait.
That's great now. Yeah.
Okay, okay. It really captures a lot. Some of the things I thought of that I think could be added that would make it even stronger is a reference to good fundraising operations uses our time best. It's an effective use of time. Somehow get across that it helps in time management when it's done right.
Okay, good.
And it also, good fundraising operations leads to improved donor satisfaction.
Oh,
They
good.
don't know it, but, and then third, I thought of, it typically leads to just fundraising success. So I think that could be a little more direct in the definition.
That's terrific. Melissa, what were your thoughts?
First of all, I thought it was really comprehensive and very clear and concise, because I think coming up with a definition for this is really hard. So bravo.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of, add to this without, I think, overcomplicating, but I think what Agnes said, I totally agree with. I also think that, scalability, so having systems in place that, can be implemented at the smaller scale, but then as an organization grows and the fundraising grows, it can really blossom into something that's very sustainable and really ramps up an organization's fundraising efforts. And then I think to Agnes's point about leading to success, it's, it provides us with the tools to consistently improve and to be looking ahead and applying what we learn.
That's good. Can you say that again, the last part? Because I want to jot this down. Just
Sure.
consistently
Sure.
improve.
Yeah, consistently, tools to consistently improve. I actually forgot what I said.
Yeah, no, that's great.
We'll have the recording.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Sorry about that.
No. It's my fault for asking you to repeat it. I just thought it was so important, and I was making a few notes. So I think these 5 or 6 additional items might need to be incorporated into our discussion later, if we don't come back to them, because scalability, time management, improved donor satisfaction, leading more consistently to donor success, and providing consistency and improvements there is so important, and is worth highlighting for sure. So I think we hopefully now understand some of the value propositions behind the work. But what I wanted to do is kind of cover some territory with what those key elements of fundraising operations really are, to each of you. And I think each of you is going to take a few of those major kind of buckets, major um, lines of work that are associated with systems and operations behind fundraising. So, Agnes, why don't we kick it off with you? What to you are the key elements of fundraising operations?
Well, beyond some of I thought, tell me if this is okay, Chris. I thought instead of, kind of sharing some of the basics that hopefully a lot of us do, I wanted to share some of the things that I think might be a little bit different or out of the box operation systems that we've created here at Shea. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so these are just things that are really important to us that we've implemented, beyond some of the real bedrock foundational things. One thing is that we make sure that, and a lot of people do this is not earth-shattering or anything, but it is part of our systems, is that we work really hard to have every donor have multiple relationships within Shea, right? And I know a lot of folks do that. But that takes a lot of work. So when we have turnover, it just goes so much more smoothly because that donor doesn't really feel it. They might say, oh, I'm going to miss so-and-so, but in their head, I know they're saying, oh, but I have so-and-so and so-and-so that I know. So that has actually become part of our systems, that each major donor gets like a team of people. And then getting into the habit of regularly asking for opinions from donors after events and after things, making that a systematic process that donors receive a survey immediately after any experience that they've had with us. That's become another just operational system thing that we make a best practice, and we end up getting just incredible feedback about that. And then also being very diligent about collecting anecdotal data that we receive when we have a system after any activity or event or gathering. We call all the donors and thank them. We divide and conquer amongst our team. And those conversations tend to end up with a lot of feedback as well, but we have a system to capture all of that just doesn't get heard and then doesn't go anywhere. And then the other thing is that all of our team and our board members are constantly being armed with what are the needs that we have. And we, at any given time of the year, our needs vary a little bit. So like at the moment right now, our biggest need is financial aid funding, and funding for our mental health program. So at any given time, everybody always knows what the needs are, and they're empowered to share those on a regular basis. So those are just some of the things that we've done here, that aren't as, kind of beyond some of the basics of using Salesforce, which we use, tracking all of our activities, things like that. But yeah, those are just some thoughts.
Great. So let me ask some questions. You had mentioned the responsibility for knowing what you're raising money for at any given time, or what the priorities are, what the needs are. And we would call that the case for support often, right? And so one of those operational issues or elements is the communication that's required, right? Whether it's posted up on the website or in a document or as talking points or proposals, right? So your office, your team is responsible for developing that case for support, right?
Hmm.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And talk to me a little bit about the fundraising channels that you're responsible for as well. Like, what are the various methods that you use at Shea to raise money? And I'm sure there's probably half a dozen or more.
Yeah, so we have two major $1 million events. We have major gifts, direct mail. We have an annual campaign, and we have a peer-to-peer campaign as well called Drive to Ride. So that keeps
Good.
us very busy.
Yeah, of course. And I know your board is very generous as well. So
Yes.
you focus on giving from them. Your grants program, I'm sure, is very strong as well. You probably do a lot of corporate stuff as well. So, I'm kind of really just highlighting the fact that in the operational setting, there are a lot of different ways to raise money, but also importantly, the department fundraising is responsible for making sure that each of these different fundraising channels operates effectively and is positioned well to success. The asks get made, yes, but all of the steps leading up to that are also there as well. Oops, sorry. And then what I was also interested in looking at too was you mentioned your CRM, your donor software, and that seems to always present a challenge for a lot of organizations, but it's essential, right, to have that process where you can identify and qualify donors, that you can track that information and then move them through the process. And it sounds like your system is pretty solid in terms of how you look at people, assign them to teams, as you mentioned, but also get them to the point where they're being asked. Oh, lost the volume again.
Use Salesforce. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Mhm.
gotcha.
I'm gonna just move my camera over here. That might help me. Okay, how's that? Is that better?
Good, good. Seems like maybe the keyboard shuts off or something,
Something
uh,
weird. The
yeah.
lights go out. Um,
Very energy
so
efficient, which is good.
yeah, saving money. Yeah, we do use Salesforce, and we've hired a consultant to customize it for us over the years. So we use it for our clients because we're a medical facility, our volunteers, and our donor base. So, and we put a lot of time, money, and energy into customizing it. So, and it's really great. It tracks every single email to any donor. It immediately puts it into their information. We are able to pull weekly reports of, every activity that everybody does all week long, with donors, whatever is in there, can get reported weekly. It's really great. There's so much more we can do with it. And I hope to kind of take it to the next level, but it's pretty efficient.
Yeah, yeah, it's just one of those multiple systems. So I guess what we're trying to drive at here through the conversation is how robust the series of systems are that lead to good fundraising. It's not simple. There's multiple different things that any fundraiser or department needs to be focused on at any time, and you've just heard kind of just a few of those. Um, Melissa, I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of the more important or key elements of operations from your perspective?
Yeah, you've actually touched on a couple of the points that I wanted to share, which is, really making sure that you know what the gift process looks like. So having a system in place, this donor CRM is super important. You need to rely on that as your single source of truth. You should be able to go in and see, every detail about a donor, because that will inform your strategy and your goals for moving them through the process. But going back to the gift processing, it's so important to have those nuts and bolts. Just as a small shop, if you don't have those in place, you're toast. So you have to be able to through a donor's perspective, what does it look like when they make a gift from the moment that we as an office know that the gift is coming, who's receiving it, how's it getting incorporated into the workflow? Is it being acknowledged in a timely manner? Is it of a level where the executive director should be calling them and personally thanking them? Are they getting thanked by a board member? If a board member is a friend with them of theirs, are they being notified? So just really understanding kind of what the gift process looks like, and making sure that the system is in place for consistency and that you can rely on it and it can grow as your organization grows. To the point of a donor CRM, it's so important, to be able to log every single touch point with your major donors especially, but ideally those that you've identified as prospects and who you want to deepen your relationship with, knowing what their last touch point was, what your next touch point is going to be. What are their interests? You should be able to log in and look at a donor's record and just really have a good sense of what inspires them, who their points of contact are. And Agnes, I love that there are multiple people who are connected with your major supporters. I think that's so important and really, I think, speaks to the sustainability of their long-term interests in your organization. So I think that's a really good strategy there. I think a third point for me would be data analysis. So, making sure you know who your donors are, not just individuals, but collectively. Who's giving to you, what are their traits, how are they involved with your organization? For us, we have a lot of adult students who take history classes or private lessons. So kind of, knowing who those big groups are, and then being able to think about what kind of inspires them, what their path to giving was, and trying to identify other potential supporters like them and tailor your messaging accordingly. And those will always be helpful in terms of informing strategic decision-making and your priorities for the year and beyond. So those are kind of my big things. And then once those are in place, you can really start thinking about kind of how you want to expand your reach and improve other systems, having a much more tailored donor experience or donor journey. You can really think about that because you have all those other systems in place to begin with.
Right. Well, I know from a sort of donor stewardship standpoint, I think about often the different annual support levels that would exist for individuals, from entry-level gifts all the way up to major support. You've got cumulative giving over time that organizations will track. You've got special campaign gifts that need to be recognized. You've got endowment gifts that might require management and reporting and tracking, right? And then using this sort of not the corpus, but the interest to support programs and reporting back what it was and how much it was and all that stuff. And then you've got legacy tracking, so who's made a commitment of their estate or some sort of planned gift to you. And so how do operations, if you could just speak to that for a minute, Melissa, about how do those systems kind of come into play for you? How do you track all of that? How do you make sure that donors are stewarded well, thanked and appreciated and recognized, all of that?
Yeah. Well, the Pasadena Conservatory is a small shop. And so a lot of it has actually been done kind of, looking at each individual donor and coming up with plans. And now I'm thinking about how we can actually systematize and, having my priority portfolio of supporters and thinking about, building into my day time to look at that group of people seeing when they were last reached out to. I look at upcoming events that I might personally invite them to. We have a lot of concerts and recitals at PCM, so I try to keep that in mind. In thinking about our calendar a little bit, we have these kind of big moments of the year with appeals, but kind of looking at those moments in between that we can really steward those relationships. So if I know someone's birthday is coming up, I put a little ping in my calendar. It shows up, and so that way I know I need to reach out to them. But I try to build out time every day to just look at my list and kind of assess where things are with a big picture in mind.
Yeah.
Does that kind of does that
Totally,
help?
yeah.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I was thinking what would be helpful if we looked at this sort of list
Mm,
here on this slide right here. It's interesting because this slide is meant to capture some of the major categories that are included in fundraising operations, and you all spoke to so many of them, and I tried to highlight a few of them that came to mind. Like we just talked about, for example, donor stewardship there toward the bottom and showing appreciation to donors, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's interesting because as you mature as a fundraising enterprise, as an organization, and you grow, all of these tracking features and different layers of appreciation become more complex. I know that some of the more significant organizations, will routinely um, change their donor walls to reflect the most recent annual giving support that was received, the changes in cumulative giving, who's now at the $1 million level over the lifetime. They'll put leaves on the planned giving legacy tree, for new people that have just made their gifts. They will have to order the plaque for the door from the person that gave money to support the campaign, or put a big plaque on the building, right, to recognize the family or organization that supported uh, the organization to such a degree that it's worthy of naming rights, that kind of thing. So it's fascinating because that's a lot to track. It's a lot to be responsible for, and that's just one little piece, donor stewardship. And what I was thinking about was, oh, then you have all of these smaller donors who may be just entry-level donors who also need to be thanked and appreciated.
mhm,
But even drilling down further, it's the systems that allow these gifts to be made, right? So when we
Mhm.
think about operations and systems, there are credit card processing or ACH processing functions that the development team is responsible for. There's selling appreciated securities, so working with brokerage. Now they're selling, Bitcoin and other types of assets, right? So, Agnes, what are some of the ways that the Shea deals with those kinds of transactions, like, and manages those?
Oh, like stock and things like that?
Stock, and then also
Property?
credit card, is it for you, and there's different ways, right? For you, is it all tied into your Salesforce database, or do you separately contract with a sort of processing company for giving of stock or giving of credit cards? Like, just, you don't have to name
No.
names, but like, how do
Uh,
you organize
everything
that?
everything is done through Salesforce. With the stock, I know our accounting department, handles that. Our CFO personally handles that. I'm not sure if he uses an outside institution to do that. The other system we contract out with is Fundraise to do our auction, our silent auction.
Yep.
We have two silent auctions with over 300 items. So that's another just, systems processes that, we use. But pretty much everything else can be done through Salesforce.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just fascinating because I'm not trying to have everyone through this webinar become an expert on all of the different vendors that are available and all these. I'm just trying to highlight all of the details.
So much.
It's so
Mhm.
much, right? Because
It is.
you just named auctions, right? Which is a sort of the event space has its own technologies and systems that are important. Plan giving has a series of calculators and different things that development departments can acquire or use to help the work there. You have, major gift elements which require perhaps that sort of appreciated securities or more complicated transactions. So there's just a whole heck of a lot of systems that are required. Um,
Users. We use a system too. We contract out with a system. Well, we have like a membership or subscription to iWave. I don't know if you've ever heard of iWave. It's
right. Perfect. Thank you for
prospective
bringing that up.
search.
The
Yeah,
We
that's a
have
whole
it
nother.
too.
Yeah, it's a whole nother.
identification and research, right, as
Mhm.
well.
Right now, we're
Is
trying to integrate Salesforce with iWave, which we're close to, so that we can pull it all up at the same time, which is exciting.
100%. Yeah. I remember how challenging it was way back in the day to do prospect research and integrate it with your database if it was two different providers doing that. And so obviously technology has improved dramatically, but that's such a good point about the identification process as well. And using tools like that and systems to help identify prospective donors or just understand the capacity of existing donors when you're trying to target asks. And what was interesting to me is, Melissa, you had earlier talked about kind of the navigation of a donor through the system and making sure
Mhm.
that there was clarity around the check comes in, who
Mhm.
touches it first, second, third, fourth, where does it go, who puts it into the database, who writes the thank you letter, does it go to this executive director, the board member, does it stay there, what, all of those things, so important,
Mhm.
right? And so that process is obviously necessary to have, but it points to something larger too, which is all of the different policies that need to exist, whether it's a donor recognition policy, whether it's an endowment management policy, or like, Melissa, tell me, and you could be developing these. There's no criticism if
Mhm.
some of these policies don't exist and need to exist because that's the reality for a lot of departments. But speak to me about policies from your perspective. And then I can always talk about the policies that I've seen at some of these billion-dollar institutions, which are crazy complex. So,
Ugh, I bet they have probably access to a wonderful legal team to help them sift
uh-huh,
through all the details and
uh-huh,
legally.
uh-huh. And access to peers who can
Yeah.
share the policies that they develop. So it's like cut and paste in many ways. And that's the reality too. Is like, for anyone out there,
Mhm.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are all of these systems and different documents and policies that exist. So you just got to find ones that closely match what you're trying to accomplish,
Yeah.
and kind of don't start from scratch. So Melissa, tell me about a little bit about the policies that you're
Yeah.
familiar with or that you've worked with.
Yeah, so we do have a gift acceptance policy. So it outlines what gifts we do accept. Gifts of stock, cash, credit card, kind of the basics. With appreciated tangible assets like real estate, it becomes a little complicated. So we do have language about that. But
Yep.
it's just, making sure that the organization is clear about what we can accept. And it's also wonderful to have those in place for those, you know, wonderful individuals who reach out and ask if you accept a certain type of donation. And, you have the answer at the ready, and can get back to them in a timely way. We have acceptance policies around in-kind donations. So as a music school, we have a lot of people who love to, gift instruments and a lot of sheet music. So we have, maximized our library. And so we now have a policy of, unless it's a really rare piece of music or, something we don't have, we
Stradivarius
unfortunately.
violin.
Yes. Oh my gosh. If you know someone who has it, please send them my way. That would be amazing. But yeah,
Grand
so
pianos.
we have a lot of grand pianos, which is wonderful. We're now very selective about the brand. Good place to be. But it's important to have clarity for your staff, so they're well armed to answer questions that come in. So we have a policy around that. We have policies around naming, term limits, gift levels. What we don't have in place right now is a regular review of that. So that's actually something I'm working on presently, is
Good.
thinking about the future as, our organization grows, how are our policies growing with it? Because policies that were in place 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they may not be as applicable or relevant. And so it's really important to constantly evaluate where your policies are and if they're serving your overarching goals.
That's so great. Yeah, again, I bring up policies because it kind of falls off the radar screen for a lot of people when they think about fundraising and what's necessary. And there are dozens of other policies that development professionals get involved in all the time. I was thinking about sort of the endowment specifically for organizations. And it's kind of interesting because one of the questions I always ask someone who sort of has an endowment or thinks they're, interested in starting an endowment is like, so at what level will you as an organization be willing to make this endowment permanent, and provide naming for it, and reporting back to the donor? And of course, most organizations aren't prepared to answer that because they don't know what that should be, or administratively, what's the difference between sort of managing a permanently endowed fund at $25,000 versus $100,000 versus $1 million, and the sort of additional workload that's required if you have a very low threshold for permanently endowing some gift of a low size. So the policies help, to your earlier point, with scalability, with consistency, leading to greater success, right? So it shouldn't be an afterthought. And I guess that's a main theme that I would like to interject. Like main theme number one, systems can't be an afterthought. They can't be, well, let's try to raise money first and then we'll figure out the systems later. Like, yeah, that might work for 6 months, but then you get yourself into real trouble real fast. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's also not specifically called out here in these summary of key elements as well. Agnes, was there anything else on this list or outside this list that came to mind for you? Oh, your volume again.
Policies, we have a third party event policy, a third party event application. So if an organization or a company wants to do something on our behalf, we have there's all kinds of processes for them to follow if they're going to do something for us, because you can get into a lot of hot water and a lot of mixed expectations from the company on what we're going to do and what they're going to do. So we created a policy around that, or a process. And then we also have UBIT guidelines, the unrelated business income tax processes, which are really important for special events and sponsors, and how they do their ads in order to meet the IRS guidelines. So those are
Great.
some things we created here recently at Shea.
Yeah, good. And I'll move on. And as I move on to this next question, it reminds me too that we didn't necessarily speak to all the regulatory requirements for fundraising as well. So if you are interested in doing some sort of raffle, you might need to apply for a raffle license. If your event is going to serve alcohol, you might need to have a liquor license, or you'll definitely need to have insurance for your event. So all of these things fall into the category of systems that connect to fundraising and can't be forgotten. So again, reminder, like there's a lot more than you're thinking about when you think about fundraising. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So let's speak just for a minute, Agnes, about the creation of these systems. How do you approach the creation of some of these things that you know you need to do? What does that look like?
A lot of it, like when I got to Shea, so much of it was, we already had some great systems, but really getting input from all the staff on what's working, what's not working, and then having regular communication about it, staying, on top of it to monitor it, and making sure we're constantly refining, but not just making it your policies, right? To make it a collective effort amongst the entire development team and CEO, COO, just have everybody involved. I think that's one of the most important things. When we administered the UBIT guidelines and started really following those very carefully, there had to be a lot of education about what it was, because there wasn't an awareness. And then we had to arm our staff that were dealing with the donors to be able to educate the donors as well about it. And then the board the board actually approved our third-party events guideline. So just making it a group effort, I think, is one of the most critical success factors, and not making decisions in a vacuum, and then just being open to constantly improve them.
That's great. Good advice. Thank you. And Melissa, what about you? How do you kind of anything different? I realize I have a different question for you in terms of management, but are there particular ways that you approach the creation of some systems?
I think what Agnes said about having a lot of different voices and kind of fingerprints on the development of these systems is super important. I for for better or worse, I'm in a position where I'm developing a lot of systems. There were kind of the fundamentals in place when I came, but we are now at a point institutionally where we're really thinking about a lot of transformational growth. And so really transforming what has been kind of a grassroots, kind of very individual operation, making sure it's manageable. So creating coding systems for certain donors and making sure that we're, I am very fortunate to work in Pasadena, where there are a lot of wonderful nonprofits, and my path has crossed with a number of wonderful colleagues at different institutions. And so using my contacts and network there to as a resource and learn more and see how other organizations are doing things. So even though I'm a small shop, I have wonderful advisors and resources that I can learn from and kind of see what they're doing and, scale it up. Some of the things that they are doing wouldn't translate for me. Maybe we're not big enough. And so it's just kind of thinking about, okay, well, what can I take from here? What are they doing that's really working well, that could work really well for me? So I try to utilize my outside resources as much as possible.
That's great.
But also we have a development committee with some board members as well as some advisors who are not on the board, and getting their feedback is so important. And for example, the term limits, we want to make sure that everyone feels good about it. We're not pushing anything through the board without having board members look at it and help us really talk through all of the different options.
That's good. Yeah. Jumping into board elements
Mhm.
and the policies related to that, or the systems related to board management, board engagement, board tracking, all of that, opens up an entirely new topic that we could spend hours talking about, as well.
Yeah.
And it's good that you've identified sort of the resources that exist. I'm sure there's a list. What struck me about that comment you just made about the development committee, and I would point this out, is that I think a lot of organizations see a development committee's job as fundraising, actually
Mm,
acquiring dollars, like raising money, um,
right.
generating the dollars, being responsible for that. And it's interesting. That's probably appropriate in many ways, but it's equally appropriate to see a development committee as the group that's helping advise on the creation of systems and helping
Mhm.
work through issues that are so numerous, like sands on at the beach, um, in terms of all of the different things that development's responsible for, and you need advisors to guide. To Agnes's point about not doing anything sort of independently, who do you
Yeah.
use to help guide? Certain decisions. Well, my mother famously says, always put a volunteer between you and trouble. And that's the issue. Yeah, there you go, Agnes. Right, and that's one of those ways your development committee can really keep you out of harm's way when the sort of decision comes to make maybe an unpopular decision to do something. Well, it's the development committee that wanted to do this. They've got my back, and we made this decision together. Agnes, you look like you're about to say something, but you're gonna probably not be able to see if you can work the volume there.
Can you hear me?
Yep, great.
Yay.
Okay. I moved my mic, so I think I'm good now. No, I just love your mom, and I heard her say that recently in a meeting, and the person she said it to is saying it all the time now.
Yeah, it's worth saying, more people need to believe it too. I think, us development folks were very exposed because we're responsible for doing so many things and not everything is popular. And we're doing things that people don't like ask for money, which is uncomfortable. So we're always in harm's way. And one of the greatest ways to keep ourselves less vulnerable is to make sure we've got the support of a volunteer and they've got our back and they're out there sort of promoting things even more than we are. But what about the management of these systems? Like Melissa, I'm sure you have this sort of struggle as every development person who's in a small and medium shop does, which is like there's so much that I'm responsible for and I don't have a lot of help. And like, so how do you do it? Like, how do you manage it all?
Uh, well, organization is key. I'm constantly making lists and checklists. I take a lot of notes because when you're thinking about a lot of different things, the chances of something slipping your mind are it's greater. So I do my best to try and take copious notes. But I think on the big picture, having a fundraising plan in place. So every year, looking at the strategic plan of the organization, knowing what the development and fundraising role is to support that. And, are we advancing those goals forward through our work? What are the priorities in terms of projects or programs that we're implementing? Is there a growth spurt coming to admin, or are we staffing up with faculty? Kind of what are the programs that we really need to devote attention to and developing a plan to help support the fundraising for that? So knowing your place in the organization and then developing a plan for the year, I think for a small shop, it's so important to really not overextend yourself. I think one of my mistakes early on was, I was really ambitious. And so I had a lot of goals that I wanted to achieve, and I was very granular. And I realized quickly it's very hard to keep on top of those throughout the year. And so giving yourself enough flexibility to kind of be creative, try new things, have those big fundraising goals that you want to really tackle. For example, right now, I know there are a lot of organizations like PCM, and we're kind of noticing a dip in the number of donors that we have. And so really thinking, okay, that's a priority for us, and we're not alone in this, which is, reassuring. However, we want to fix this, we want to address it. And so a priority for us this year is to look at the constituencies who are, directly related to our work, and how can we involve them more? How can we engage them? The development committee can help with that in terms of thinking big picture. We can also involve the program staff. And so it's not, you want to have those overarching goals, but then be able to kind of fill in sub goals as you go along and explore all of your options. So the fundraising plan is really key, and having a calendar. What are the big points throughout the
Perfect.
year? We have, this year we have our regular general operating that we do, fall appeal, spring appeal, donor thank you reporting, impact reporting that we schedule out. But we also finished out a capital campaign. So what was the messaging to close that out? How does that fit in with the overall structure of our general operating? We also announced the retirement of our long-term executive director, which is a big thing for us. And so how does that fit in with everything? And really thinking about the communications, who's getting brought into the conversation on the back end, but also the donors. When are you reaching out to them? How do they feel brought into the process? And not leaving anyone out of the process. So it's important to have big picture and fill in accordingly.
Yeah. Well, you said it really well, which was something we hadn't heard or specifically before, which is the idea of having a plan. And that's part of that operations requirement is knowing what you're going to do because you have a plan and having a calendar and approaching it from a project management kind of perspective, right? So fundraising is, let's be clear, a lot of project management where there's all these necessary steps. And, when you hear people talk about, actually fundraising is sort of 90% planning and 10% the ask, they're right, and it's probably even less a percentage of the ask because that's just a moment, a snapshot in time. But there's so much that goes on before and after that ask moment to support the work of good fundraising. So what about challenges? Like what are the biggest challenges that you've faced, Agnes, in the fundraising operations field, and how have you kind of tried to overcome them?
Well, trying to get staff to adhere to the operations and the systems and the policies that we've put into place can be challenging sometimes, especially if they're new and they're not used to them. The policies are new. So we've worked on that by putting some of these things in actual staff performance standards. So it really drives home the importance of adhering to the policies and procedures. But on the flip side, what I have seen is leaders or executives who are immersed in the system so much and not spending enough time with the donors because they're so deep into the systems. And so that's the opposite problem,
Perfect.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's just a caution too, that, if you're so embedded in the systems and trying to fix them, but you're losing sight of the time that you should be spending with donors, there's got to be a balance. So, and I saw that more on in a larger organization that I worked for. That some people were just caught up in that.
That's good. So good.
To my previous point, though, holding staff accountable to those systems. But where I've seen that backfire is when the systems create goals and objectives for staff, like certain number of meetings per week, and that's tracked in our system. I've seen that backfire very badly as well when it's just too aggressive, like it's unattainable. And the staff get very disenchanted, very demotivated. So
Interesting.
things
Good.
just need to be realistic.
That's good. Thank you. Melissa, what about you?
I think that the biggest challenge for me is working in a small office and a small shop, not having a lot of people around me in my office or vicinity to bounce ideas off of. So much of our work is social, and it's really important to have other perspectives kind of weighing in. And so one way that I've kind of tried to address that is by networking. I became pretty involved with AFP, the Greater Los Angeles chapter, met a lot of wonderful fundraisers and had the chance to, work with them and to get their feedback on things, ask for their advice with something I might be grappling with. But it's so important to surround yourself with really wonderful people. I think that you want to surround yourself with people who not only inspire you, but challenge you and are honest with you. Because when we're doing this work in a small shop, sometimes it can feel like you're in a silo and this is a great idea. And I'm going to, just kind of go full steam ahead. And then when you run it by someone, oh no, there's some issues that you might not have thought about. And so having someone who can really be honest with you and give you feedback is super important.
I love it. So good. So good. Um, well, it's interesting. I know we're tight on time, but Agnes, is there a good way to sort of distinguish or differ between the fundraising operations of a small to a large organization? Like how should someone who's not familiar with the difference interpret this? Like, what are those differences?
My goodness, there's so many differences. But I guess there's benefits to each one. And I feel fortunate now that I've worked with, $1 billion organization and an international organization and a smaller shop because I spent so much time at that large organization. But it's not as different as I thought it was going to be.
Good.
There's all the obvious benefits of being with a large organization, all those staff, all those best practices, all the systems and procedures and policies, and that's all it's all done for you, right? But in a small shop, you've got to create them yourself. And you've got to adhere to them. But the thing I love about a small shop is you can be so entrepreneurial and you can change, you can fix, you can tinker. You can be really out of the box. You can, we do a lot of above and beyond things for donors here. Not that cost money necessarily, but are just really extraordinary. And I would have had a hard time doing that in my previous organization. They would have frowned upon that. So, there's benefits to both systems and I like both of them. I wish I could
Good.
just put them all together.
Yeah, good. Well, it's a helpful perspective. And I know we're probably tight on time for both of you and want to honor your time commitment to us. But as we wrap up, just a couple more questions. Melissa, what are some of the things that you're excited about focusing on in the future from a fundraising operations perspective?
Yeah. So I feel like in the work that we're doing, we do a pretty good job at engaging our donors and stewarding our donors. But one area we can really focus more on is prospect research. And we have the tools, but now it's how do we use those tools to our benefit? And, I can identify certain people within our pool who might have capacity and affinity, but what do we do with that information now? How do we identify them for a certain type of track? How do I identify them as people we should flag for board members? Do we invite them to things? So just figuring out what the path is once they're identified and trying to figure out the right path of engagement. So I really want to focus on that and systematize that so it's easier to kind of look at all the different individuals within those various categories.
Great. That's great. Real quickly, is there an AI element to the work that you're doing right now? I know it'll dramatically change and evolve over time, but is there a way that you find AI helping the work that you're doing today? Could be very basic, yeah.
Yeah, very basic. All my staff have become much better writers all of a sudden.
It's true.
That's
It's
funny.
true. Uh,
I love when they admit it too. I'm like, wow, did you write this? No.
yeah. Fair. Yeah. I mean, that's good.
Love
That's
the honesty.
one of the
Yeah.
benefits of incorporating AI. Is it improving the writing? Is it generating images that might hit the spot more than for free than what you might be able to purchase
Mm,
via Getty Images or something, right? So,
yeah.
anything, Melissa, that you're using AI for today?
Yeah, I actually heard a phrase the other day that it's really good for cutting down the busy work, but not the real work. So how can we find efficiencies and look for ways to be better at our job? But ultimately, it's going to come down to our instincts, our relationships with our donors, and our interactions with them. But, thinking globally, it can be really helpful. I've used it for data analysis. So I plugged in raw data about donor numbers, nothing personal, but like, how many donors do we have? What's the recapture rate? What's the average gift size? And I just copied and pasted from a spreadsheet, put it in there, and it gave me some really interesting insights that were accurate. And so it was
Perfect. That's
helpful to
great.
use it to get it going, and then you can run with it and make stronger associations that will influence your strategic decision making
Right.
more.
Right. And that's how you're using it, but admittedly to all of these systems, whether credit
Mhm.
card processing or LinkedIn or Google search, they're all using, AI. So your systems are using it whether you are intentionally looking to do it or not. So that's what's
Yeah.
fascinating. But I think it's great that we're all figuring out ways that we can incorporate it better in our daily lives. So last but not least, what quick advice would you give to people that are listening to this webinar? How would you advise them? What would be something that you would tell them to do that might be helpful to them, no matter where they are in their fundraising journey? Agnes, what you have any advice
I
for?
think, yeah, I think one of the most important things we did here at Shea was really get really clear on how we're thanking donors. And we're also, um, so every single week, or no, not every week, multiple times a week, usually 2 or 3 times a week, an email is sent out. These donations came in and thank you calls are assigned, well, and it's regardless of amount. And so, and they're assigned amongst our staff team, and then we decide whether or not those get also thanked by a board member. But that was a game changer, those phone calls for us. That was the biggest thing that we changed when I came, because that was very inconsistent when I came. Some donors were getting thanked, some weren't. So we
Right.
just bit the bullet, and that was the number one thing I think that's kind of catapulted our relationship with our donors.
Excellent. Great advice. Melissa, what about you? Any advice?
Yeah, I'd say just, be willing to take a step back when things are busy and you're kind of in the thick of it, and just really evaluate if what you're doing is serving a greater purpose. It's so easy for us to kind of look at the daily grind. Oh my God, I have so many emails I have to get through. I haven't followed up on this grant proposal or something. And there are other little things that pop up, and it's just really important to take a step back and get some perspective on the bigger picture, and just making sure that the things you're working on, that you're prioritizing the right things.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I was thinking about my own advice, and of course, one of those things is never let a lack of a particular system interfere with your ability and desire to make an ask. Right. So
Mhm.
there's all kinds of excuses you can make. We don't have the systems for this. We can't do that because. But the reality is, there's not much that should prevent you from when the timing is right and you have the relationship to make an ask, to invite support. Systems are great, but it shouldn't ever interfere with fundraising. And the last thing is this like concept of making a list of the systems that you have in place that are working well, green, the systems that need some help that you've either started or aren't working as well. Those are sort of cautionary, put them in yellow. And then the systems that you just don't have that you probably need, you put in red. So you always have in focus the different systems that are meant to be helpful to you. You're never going to have everything in the green column. It's always a work in progress, but it's good to have some perspective and understanding about that.
That's great.
Yeah. So with that, I'm hopeful that those of you that have enjoyed this, that you have enjoyed this presentation, this webinar, that it was helpful, edifying, that it gave you some ideas and ways to think about systems to support fundraising, that you didn't know about, or that was a good reminder to you. So please do reach out to me if there's anything that this webinar caused questions with you about. I'd love to get in dialogue, love to hear your reactions, your feedback. So do be in touch. And last but not least, let me please again thank our wonderful presenters, Melissa and Agnes. I'm so grateful to you for contributing your knowledge to this session, and just wishing you all the best in your journey and your continued fundraising endeavors. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes. All right. So everyone be well. Good luck with your fundraising, and don't be shy. Be in touch with us and have a great day.